Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is a special edition of Inspiring Doubt. This is actually a follow-up episode where I guess it was about a week and a half ago now. I'll post the links in the event page. But Trey and I got together. I'm joined again by Trey Jadlow. We got together to discuss Kim Davis, the county clerk in Kentucky, who had been refusing at the time we originally arranged it to issue any marriage licenses from her office for same-sex couples, as pursuant to the Obergefell Supreme Court decision. In the time between when we decided to do the show and when we actually started doing the show, she had been released from jail from her contempt charges. And since then, her office has been issuing marriage licenses for people. However, they have been issued in a modified fashion that no longer have her name on them anywhere. So there's actually an attorney challenging this, and we'll see where this progresses to at this point. However, Trey and I, we talked for an hour about this last time, and it was really, let me make sure I have the right word here. I thought it was really valuable that we were able to agree on a few things. For example, I just want a quote here. I have a quote written down here. So I asked Trey, for example, if a law were passed requiring a religious test for me to have office. I am an atheist myself, or to have my name appear on a ballot. And the Supreme Court were to strike that down, say, no, that can't happen. But a county clerk were to try to enforce that and refuse to put my name on a ballot, or to allow me to put my name on a ballot for an upcoming election. I asked Trey what should happen, and I believe his exact words or what his opinion of that is. He said they would be violating the oath that they took. That clerk has an obligation to the Constitution as working for the government, as does Kim Davis. So on that, you and I agree, correct, Trey?
That was my quote?
That was a direct quote to the best of my ability.
I don't think that doesn't sound like me.
It's at about the 43-minute mark in the last one. I watched it several times, and I used the transcription as well. But they would be violating the oath they took, and that seemed like the end of a sentence there. And then that clerk has an obligation to the Constitution as working for the government, as does Kim Davis. That's the direct quote. And you're right, that did not sound like you. As a matter of fact, when you said that, I said, well, thank you for making my point for me. And I think I probably could have just ended the show there, but you wanted to continue. So from there, you made a few additional statements that you said that we cannot have the freedom of religion and the freedom of, now this is a quote again, you cannot have the freedom of religion and the freedom of erotic liberty when they can never be reconciled. Said that as such, the Supreme Court decision, Obergefell versus Hodges, is unconstitutional. It violates the First Amendment as you see it.
Right.
And here's another quote. If the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court, though, if it was they, I think, in there, but the Supreme Court happens to have a decision that violates the fundamental premise of the original intent of the Constitution, they are going rogue.
Right.
So that was sort of the gist of your overall argument there, right? That the position of the Supreme Court in the Obergefell decision was not a valid decision,
right? Because
you believe it violated the First Amendment, and as such, you believe that the proper course of action is for any individual government employee of the executive branch here, in this case, I'm assuming you would agree in all cases, though, to recognize that is an unconstitutional decision and act accordingly and simply ignore what the Supreme Court has said. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think not only would such a person have the right, they really have the duty, if they want to be a good American citizen, to uphold the Constitution rather than the revisionists that deny the fundamental foundations of our Constitution and the mindset that was behind it. Because once you do that, it becomes a meaningless document. Makes it whatever you want.
Sure, I absolutely agree that if we don't uphold the Constitution, we don't follow the Constitution, it just becomes a meaningless document. Especially, now I want to make this really clear, because we're talking about the Supreme Court and the Constitution, and a person acting in their official capacity as an agent of the legislative branch, or I'm sorry, the executive branch of the government. That is Kim Davis. So we're talking about the government as such, and private citizens as they interact with the government. So you mentioned rights. You said that she has the right to do that, and even the responsibility if she wants to be a good American. Now, when you say the right, is that a constitutional right, something that is granted by the Constitution, or do you mean that on a more fundamental level?
Well, both, because the Constitution refers to natural law theory, does it not?
Can you be a bit more explicit in what you mean by that?
Well, the Constitution doesn't say that whoever makes the laws willy-nilly gives right to mankind to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, do they? It's a Lockean terminology. It's natural.
Well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I believe that's from the Declaration of Independence. That's
right, which is the philosophical foundation of the founding charter of our country.
Well, it's not a binding document.
It's Lockean theory. There's
quite a bit of Lockean theory out there, and I mean we talked a bit about the sort of the underlying philosophy behind the separation of church and state in the past.
Which you admit that you know nothing of, right?
No. I said that we're not going to talk about that because it's a red herring. It's not relevant.
No, because you're not educated on it. That's the problem. But that's the fundamental issue.
You can believe that can be your assertion. And if you'd like to educate me on it, feel free to provide as many documents as you'd like. My or how to contact me online. Otherwise, I'll give you my own personal address. You can mail me as much as well, because I have no reason to believe that you are an intellectual authority on this subject.
The problem is you're ignorant on it and you're trying to cover up.
Well, that can, again, you can have this assertion all you'd like. You can feel that I'm ignorant, and that's really irrelevant.
I'm reasoning it. You won't talk about it because you can't.
Well, but really, I'd like you to justify why that's relevant to your case.
It's everything. Do you not agree that this whole thing is about the First Amendment?
The whole thing is about what I believe and what I know about the history of the First Amendment?
Yes.
That's what this argument is about. It's about me personally and what Greg Bray believes.
You know what?
Knows about the history.
When you get into the corner, you just talk and you talk and you talk. You don't let anybody else talk. You notice that?
By all means, talk. I'm asking you a direct question, though. Did we come here to talk about what I know about the history?
Indeed, we did, because we're talking about the First Amendment. If you don't understand the First Amendment, then doesn't that have a bearing on our conversation?
Well, I absolutely think that the First Amendment has a bearing on the conversation. I want to know why my education about it, my position on it is relevant.
Okay, tell me about the foundation of the doctrine of the separation of church and state. Why was it important to our founding fathers?
That's an incredibly broad question.
Go ahead. You have wide berth. Go ahead.
Well, to start, just a brief introduction as to why this is important. And this will not in any way be thorough or exhaustive, but it's because there had been a long history of wars that were fought throughout Europe and throughout the place that these people are coming from, that were based upon conflicts between the church being officially adopted by the state and being enforced upon constituents, and then that changing back and forth, warring states, and when imperialism came about, there's when you're suddenly under a new ruler, you suddenly have to change religions, and they felt that it was a fundamental right of every individual to hold within their individual conscience whatever religious beliefs that they adhere to, they desire to, that seem right to them. Does that seem pretty accurate to you?
I think so. And so what was the purpose?
The purpose was to ensure that they have that right individually to act in their own conscience, or to hold their own conscience, to not have anybody else's religion enforced upon them by the government.
Okay, so what was Locke's view on that as it related to the Constitution?
I'm not sure exactly.
There's one class of people that Locke denied that right. You know who it was?
I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say gypsies.
The atheists.
Oh,
because you know why?
Because Locke was what? A fundamentalist Christian? Is that...
well, he was a Calvinist, a Puritan. His parents were Puritans, and he was a Socinian. And toward the end of his life, he moved more toward an Arian perspective. But yes, he was in the Christian paradigm, and that's how the founding fathers.
So I can understand why you would like to focus on Locke. That makes perfect sense. I mean, this is somebody who's coming from your perspective. But was Locke the only person to make any relevant arguments on this, or write any relevant documents on this?
Tell me which one of the founding fathers.
I mean, does the Constitution say anywhere in it? According to John Locke,
he's stuck in a hole.
Must be there.
Yeah, you don't let anybody else talk when you get.
I'm the host of the show. I need to keep it on track here, Trey. You're trying to derail it, trying to talk about John Locke and why John Locke specifically is important. But frankly, this is a very, very long hell. And even you last time we did the show, said that it wasn't John Locke's idea, right? You claimed that it came directly out of the Bible.
No, it came directly from Roger Williams.
No, you said it is a biblical principle.
Well, Roger Williams, it's a Christian doctrine. Do you agree with that?
You mentioned it coming from render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. It was coming directly from Jesus.
So it's a Christian doctrine. You agree?
I don't agree. I'm discussing what you asserted.
Okay, well, prove me wrong.
Well, that's, I don't need to in this context, so I'm not going to waste the time. What I will say, though, is that as I said in the last show, even if it did originate within Christian scripture, there's nothing wrong from my perspective with recognizing a good idea when I see one, right? I mean, there's all kinds of crazy malarkey that happens in the Bible. But you don't have a clue. There's not a couple of bad gems. A couple of gems in there, right? I'm not going to pile or dig through piles of horse dung to find these things. But if something is presented to me and say, "Oh, this happened to come from the Bible," great.
Okay, what's your rational justification for your meta narrative that you're saying that the sanctity?
And we're coming back to the rational justification, which is kind of your shtick. But what I'd like to talk about is the constitutional justification.
Because the Constitution is based on rational coherence.
But we're talking about the rule of law, the code of law, right? You said that, and again, to quote,
sure would like to talk.
That clerk has an obligation to the Constitution as working for the government, as does Kim Davis. So the Constitution, you said, is what they are obligated to follow. You'd like to talk about the philosophy behind the Constitution, but that's something that there's actually...
You just said context is everything, didn't you?
What I was about to say here is, though, there's actually within the Constitution, there's something laid forth for people to interpret decisions or to interpret laws based on the Constitution, right? There's a group of people that have been designated for this purpose. As a matter of fact, an entire branch of the government. Is that correct?
No, Thomas Jefferson warned against following blindly the justices.
And you hear that quote a bunch, the Thomas Jefferson quote. Is that, now, the quote from Thomas Jefferson, is that in the Constitution? No,
why would it be? He's the principal author, was he not?
But is he the only person whose signature is on it? I mean, is Thomas Jefferson was the principal author of the Constitution, but it had to be ratified by a fair number of people, right? I mean, you seem to be making pretty severe arguments from authority here. John Locke.
No, you're the one making the private authority. You're saying that if the oligarchy says so, then I believe it. And I'm saying no.
I'm making a legal argument based on the legal framework, right? The law is the law. I'm not here. It's not my job or my role, and I have no legal authority to interpret the law. But there are people that do.
Okay, well, I'm ready to read a quote if you'd let me.
Feel free.
From Thomas Jefferson. The judiciary of the United States is a subtle core of sappers and miners constantly working underground to undermine our Constitution from a coordinate of general and special government to a general supreme one alone. This will lay things at their feet. I say that against this, every man should raise his voice and more should uplift his arm. he was constantly harping about we need to be careful that the judiciary doesn't start legislating from the bench, and that we just don't bow down to them, but we keep our eye on the Constitution.
Sure,
and we keep
you're
it in the balance of power.
I grant that. I absolutely do. I think that there's a real sincere danger to the judicial branch going rogue, right, and starting to make decisions that are incredibly detrimental. As a matter of fact, I feel that there have been some times that they've made some horrific decisions. I mean, I could name a handful of recent decisions even. We can talk about the Citizens United case. I think was a absolute travesty. Does that mean, though, that my opinion matters? What can I do to make that change?
Well, all I'm saying is that I am at liberty and freedom to disobey. If I were in Kim Davis's,
but you're not. You're going to make the fundamental human right, if you will, argument to say that you are at liberty to do that. But that doesn't mean that there won't be consequences in a pragmatic sense. The government has a framework, and the government is required within that framework to enforce that framework as it is officially interpreted by an official organization that interprets it, right? My interpretation of it doesn't matter. Your interpretation of it doesn't matter.
So when they say something, we just need to say, I believe and I'm going to follow. Right?
What are our options, Trey? You seem to be the one.
You just told me that we have to, right?
No, well, there's options, though. There's ways that we can make a difference. Well, you seem to be the constitutional expert here, right? So
I am not an expert. I make teeth.
Okay. Well, so what routes do you think people can go?
You're the one making the assertion. I would like to hear what you have to say.
I'd like to ask if
I will have to follow it. And you're saying it's wrong to disobey. So I'm saying, what should we do?
No, I didn't say that it's wrong to disobey.
Oh, you did?
I did not say, because wrong is a moral question, right? That's not a legal question.
Incorrect? I mean, I don't get it.
It's illegal to disobey. It can be still right to break the law on a moral level.
Okay.
I'm totally okay with it being morally okay with breaking. As a matter of fact, even morally obligatory to break the law. Good. If there is an unjust law, then I would say that we have a moral obligation to not follow that law. But that doesn't mean that we have a legal right to side with our own moral compass in that regard and just overrule the government. I mean, there's consequences to.
How do you reconcile these statements?
Because one of them is a metaphysical, philosophical position. The other one is a pragmatic. The government exists.
We have two existences, and we live in two worlds, and we do one differently and then the other. I don't understand.
No. There's the moral realm, right? We can look at things on a moral level and say this is what we should or should not do. We can also look at things on a legal level and say this is what we can or cannot do. And if we do these things or do not do these things, these are the legal consequences that will be brought upon us.
Right.
So the legal consequences in the case of Kim Davis was contempt of court. She was told that she needed to do this,
right,
and she refused to, and therefore she went to jail. And she came out of jail, and maybe going back, we're not totally sure exactly where that stands, but she acquiesced to what the judge pressed upon her in some way that may or may not be permissible. Time will tell.
I don't think it is. I mean, she can't issue them without her name and then being licensed, but she also they cannot be issued with her name also and then without her consent. Either way, it's not going to work if they're going to be legal.
Right. I mean, here you're saying that if they're going to be legal. So clearly you do understand that, there is a code of law and the code of law has things written in it. So the Constitution has things like that too. I mean, you admitted your ignorance to this earlier. So the Constitution, it has systems built into it whereby if we, the populace, or if the legislative branch, or even the executive branch have strong disagreements with a decision from the Supreme Court, they can do stuff about that. It's not like we're just slaves to the Supreme Court.
Like Martin Luther King did?
Well, in a way,
It's called civil disobedience.
well, that is one way. Civil disobedience does not directly change anything. I'm trying to remember
because
the Civil Rights Act was not an amendment to anything, so that he didn't make anything to the Supreme Law. But yeah, he did get laws changed, right? He got the Civil Rights Act passed. Because before that, the Constitution is nothing but more law, right? It's just the supreme law of the land. It's all of the other laws are just fleshing out the framework of it. But the Constitution is not a law. It is law in its own regard. But yeah, for example, you're right. Martin Luther King, civil disobedience was his trick, and it worked really well. I appreciate that he was willing to do it, and he sat some time in jail because that's the consequences of civil disobedience on occasion, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you feel that it was illegal for the government to put Martin Luther King in jail for his civil disobedience?
Well, it was they may have been following a law, but Martin Luther was following a higher law.
Okay, so we're going to make the law of the following the higher. That's actually the argument that Kim Davis makes.
Greg, it's the same law that you make.
Law.
It's the same law you make, only you can't justify it. You just do it in blind faith.
Well, but we're here to talk about, because you believe it was illegal. You believe it is illegal for Kim Davis to have been put in jail, and illegal for Kim Davis to be told that she must either sign these documents, issue these documents from her office,
from the perspective of our founding documents, yes. But in the approximate sense, it's illegal for her to disobey. But I'm saying there's a higher law that she needs to follow. Just like you say, Martin Luther King was following a higher law. He should have done that.
Okay, so you're admitting now entirely that according to the law, what Kim Davis is doing is illegal, and that it is right for the government from the legal perspective, not a moral question, but legal. The government should have told her that she has to sign these documents, or she has to resign her position.
No.
And if she refused to do that, if she refused to do either of those things, if she refused to act in her official capacity as an agent of the government, according to the laws of the government, then she chose to exercise her civil disobedience and do neither of what she was ordered by the court. It was right on a legally right for the government to put her in jail.
No, it's not legally right for the Supreme Court to abrogate the First Amendment. That's my problem. So,
but that's irrational. It can't be not legally right for that. The Supreme Court, it's the Supreme Court's job to decide what the First Amendment means, what the Second. It's not yours or mine.
Oh, so they get to say whatever they want, and we're going to bow the knee.
We have recourse, do we not?
Yeah, it's called disobedience. It's called rebellion.
We have
revolt.
We have other. So
that's what our whole
short of violent revolution or even non-violent revolution. Are there ways that we can change the decisions of the Supreme Court?
I don't know. You're the one that's asserting. Go ahead.
So you're admitting that you don't know of any? Maybe this is the problem.
No, I don't.
You're just completely ignorant to the fact that there are methods for this to happen. For example, Supreme Court justices that have gone rogue, as you see it, can be removed from office. They can be impeached by the legislative branch.
Okay.
They can be replaced. They can a new person can come in. The executive branch can nominate, and then the legislative branch, of course, ratifies that nomination.
What if all three branches are corrupt, homie?
Then you have a government that is corrupt,
and revolt is necessary.
And revolt is the only option. I'll grant you that, but that's not a legal argument, now is it? I mean, that's
I don't know.
Philosophical argument that for you to say that
it's a legal argument by our Constitution.
The Constitution does not grant the legal right to revolt and replace the government. That's not. It's not actually.
Yeah, it is. It's.
Could you cite that?
Yeah, it would be in the second book of Locke's Treatise on Government.
But sorry,
149.
You are evidently confused. Where in the Constitution is that right?
It was based upon that social contract theory.
Okay, and where in the Constitution does it say that it's
I don't know,
based upon social contract theory? I mean, are there footnotes or an appendix that it says refer to this?
No, Lockean thought is what was behind all of our founding fathers when they wrote it. That's what it is. That's what we did. We revolted, Greg. Did you realize that? We revolted against King George.
I'm well aware of how the U.S. I even know that there was an earlier constitution before the current constitution. There was the Articles of Confederation. It failed. It did not work. So we wrote a new one, right?
Okay, so you're saying our documents are not based on social contract theory?
I am happy to grant that it's based on social contract theory.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then we're fine.
Well, there's clearly a disconnect, because you still think that it was illegal for the Supreme Court to make the decision that it did.
Indeed, I did, because they abrogated the First Amendment. How difficult is that? I don't understand why you can't understand that.
I fully understand that you feel that they.
No, I read it, and you haven't rebutted it. Why can't you rebut it?
That they abrogated the First Amendment?
Yeah.
Because it's an irrational statement to begin with. You haven't really justified
assertion. Go ahead and justify
it. You haven't justified how they abrogated the First Amendment. Wait, hold on. Because I do have some quotes.
Oh, don't say more.
So you went ahead and said that homosexuality and Christianity are at irreconcilable odds. One is going to have to be given precedence over the other. We're going to promote homosexuality or erotic liberties, and we're going to put down religious liberties. You said that the separation of Christians or church and state is a Christian doctrine, and the 14th Amendment was written for equal protection of people to be treated equally, but homosexuality is not viable in the paradigm of the founding fathers of the Constitution, which was based upon a Christian meta-narrative. It is at irreconcilable odds. You cannot have freedom of religion and the freedom of erotic liberty when they can never be reconciled together. Is that seem like an accurate quote?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Hey, Greg, real quick before we move on, can I ask your permission to have? I've had 30% of my Hangouts done by other people have been either deleted or blocked. Can I have permission to copy this and use it at my will of all of our interactions? Is that okay?
Well, I'll say that you are welcome to copy it and paste it in full. Any edited versions, I'd like to be able to review before.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I
understand. For the record, that's true on any of the Hangouts that I do. Anybody who's involved in one of mine has every right to use the footage. So yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sorry. So let's try to get back here. I interrupted, but so yes, that is an accurate statement for me, that the idea of homosexuality being equated with something, say, like race, would be totally inane. There are now that's not to say that they're not heritable characteristics that make people prone to toward homosexual behavior. I'm not denying that, but I'm saying to make it a class of people as if somehow it's a virtuous act to commit anal sodomy. It is.
I'm not aware of a lot of lesbians doing that.
Well, even for female to female, it's not.
I'm sure they can.
Anyway, so the idea that somehow that you give special rights to that which is absolutely always for 2,000 years has been irreconcilable with the biblical narrative would be wholly. They would go nuts. They would say, "What are you talking about? How can you say something like that?"
Can you explain though how homosexuality is being enforced upon Christians?
Tim Davis just went to jail because of it.
Kim Davis went to jail because she
wouldn't bow to it. She would not celebrate it. She would say, "You are great because you do it."
It's not a county clerk. Her job is to file paperwork.
Right, but not paperwork.
Official records keeper.
Not that blasphemes her God. That's the whole point.
So, do you think she files divorce papers?
Yeah, and the Bible gives freedom for a divorce.
Not sure that it gives freedom for divorce.
Sure, it does.
Without just cause, right? There needs.
Well, it's not her job to ask
every other. So wait, is it her job to ask what kind of sex acts a homosexual couple is going to engage in?
No, she's not. She has nothing to do with the sex act.
But you're the one who talked about the anal penetration earlier.
Well, that's what homosexuality is.
I'd beg to differ on that. There's quite a bit of nuance, and as a matter of fact, I've known homosexual couples that don't, male homosexual couples that don't engage in any sort of anal play or sodomy at all. That's
yeah, but they can't have sex with the parts that fit with each other. Would you agree?
So where in the laws for marriage does it require that marriages are based on sex?
Well, no. From the legal perspective, the purpose of regulating marriage from the civil perspective is the compelling interest of society. You've got to continue on with citizens. Homosexuality, we didn't add on to marriage with this new definition. We completely changed it. Children used to be the center of it. Now children are ancillary and they have nothing to do with it. So we have removed protection from them and put the protection.
You're trying to argue about the underlying philosophy behind these, but
silly legal. Let's stop thinking.
But that's not how laws work, right? I mean, I don't know if you know any lawyers, but lawyers have a really hard time. Judges do need to at times consider the underlying philosophy. That is part of their role. But they also need to consider the laws as written.
Right now.
I'm sorry?
You have an underlying philosophy to what you're saying right now. You just don't talk about it, right?
Well, sure. Everybody does to some extent. But I'm speaking from the perspective, from a legal framework. Based on the laws as they are written.
Indeed. We both are.
Okay, and you're arguing that it's written somewhere that the purpose of marriage is, written somewhere in code of U.S. law that the purpose of marriage is to promote families.
No, it's just been has anybody ever questioned marriage until now in the history of 2,000 years?
Sure.
When has homosexual marriage been considered called marriage? By the state.
I don't think that was the case, but frankly, interracial marriage wasn't.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
It does, though, because in an analogy, you may not believe it's a perfect analogy, but there was a time when interracial marriage was never recognized as a legal marriage in the state, in any state in the United States. So, if you want to argue that there needs to be a precedent for it, well, then we can never make any changes or progress, but we can change laws.
Yeah, but let's think about it.
We can change the Constitution even, which is another one of the ways. By the way, when we mentioned the legislative, they can replace rogue justices. They can even dissolve the Supreme Court and put a new one in place. That's allowed. They can completely eliminate the Supreme Court and then create a new Supreme Court. That's within their constitutional right. So I don't know. I mean, this idea of rogue judges is laughably off base when we don't see either of the other two branches of the government making any sort of steps to do these things, to impeach the judges or to amend the Constitution. I mean, we had several people that are currently running for the Republican nomination who have mentioned possibly amending the Constitution to change this decision. The Obergefell.
I don't think we need to amend the Constitution. We need to just get back to the Constitution. Keep the law as it is.
But I mean, you admitted yourself that we're within the Constitution as that's the laws as they currently are, right?
No, in a modern I said they misinterpreted it. That's just what this whole hang-up is about.
Right. And if the Constitution is being misinterpreted, you want to argue that we need to go back to the Constitution, but whose interpretation of the proper you can say to the interpretation Locke would have, but that's an assertion, right? You just have to say, well, this is.
No, I would say the founding fathers.
Okay, well, the interpretation the founding fathers would have. I mean, that's been debated in courts for years. They always that's often talked about. What would the founding fathers?
And we've been drifting for decades, more and more, and we're falling away. I'm not planning on winning, but I'm planning on not going down with a fight because we are moving toward anarchy. And I'm not saying the whole world is going to fall apart. I'm saying those that hold to the gay marriage paradigm have no meta-narrative like Greg Bray. And you guys live by blind, irrational faith. You have no rational justification for your view. You just say, I feel this way.
I have plenty of justification rationally for why gay people should be able to be married versus
you don't have. No, you're presupposing the sanctity of existence. Please give justification for that.
that is such a wildly off-topic question. I'm not going to.
No, it's a fundamental. I know, because you can't. You haven't.
It's hilarious how you always try to bring things back to your apologetic.
I know, just thinking.
Which we've talked about all the flaws in that one that you won't recognize.
Oh, but, I know. Yeah, you really are.
That's another hangout. That's a hangout for another day, right? So today I think we can just stick on topic on the legal argument. You're still sticking to your guns that it was illegal for Kim Davis to be put into jail.
Those are not my guns. Oh yeah, it's illegal for her. Yes.
Right. It is illegal for her to have been put into jail. And it was illegal for the Supreme Court to make the decision that it did in Obergefell versus Hodges. And the only recourse that we have for that is revolt.
Wait a minute. Disobedience. All right, you outlined that we could recall the justices and do all that stuff. Is any of that stuff going to happen, honestly?
Well, I mean, people made that argument before the 13th and 14th Amendment were passed, I'm sure. Is anybody ever going to see any? I mean, women's suffrage probably had a lot of people, a lot of detractors saying that, is this ever going to happen too? Well, then I believe it was the 19th Amendment went ahead and happened. So yeah, it can happen. As a matter of fact, there's a pretty strong movement right now from people like me who look at the Citizens United decision and say that that was one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has ever made, and are trying to amend the Constitution to fix that problem, because we recognize that it's a much more rational course of action if we want to avoid chaos and anarchy, to try to change things within the framework of the Constitution and the methods that are laid forth within it first, before we resort to outright revolt. Wouldn't you say that that's the most rational course of action, is to try to change things internally first in a nonviolent fashion? If it lays this out in front of you and says, here's an option you have, right? We can elect new people into office.
Great, we've been doing that. We've been doing that for years for us, and it's not working. And I'm not saying we need to take up pitchforks and go, and I'm just saying I'm just not going to obey. I'm not going to.
Well, I'd say that the Christian right has actually made some progress in recent years. Right now, the Republican Party, which is more aligned with the Christian values and has many of them in their official party platform, has taken control of the House and the Senate and has been pushing laws that are things like defunding Planned Parenthood, which didn't quite make it through the Senate. But I mean, the House offered that, right? They have offered several laws. They've even passed a few. They, I believe, repealed, or maybe they just let die off a handful of laws that were against sort of this perspective as well. So the tactic of voting people into office that have the perspective that you'd like to see actually can make a difference, especially within the House of Representatives, right? That's a much smaller group of people voting for them for each individual one, and there's a larger number of them. So we can see a lot more variety within there, and that is one option that we have. Why aren't you fighting for that?
Well, I am fighting for that, but I'm saying right now you are telling me that I cannot have business, Sweet Cakes by Melissa, if I don't celebrate homosexuality. I cannot be in a judge unless I want to marry homosexuals and define my faith. I'm being further and further marginalized. I
thought the cake one won the Supreme Court.
No, they haven't gone to the Supreme Court. She was charged $135,000 for not celebrating, for causing whatever to the gal there, I forget what's called, emotional harm or whatever, which she.
Well, there was a recent decision that did go that direction. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I'm drawing a blank on it. So maybe I shouldn't.
Greg, the point is that we are being further and further marginalized, and the very fundamental amendment to our Constitution is completely obliterated. And I'm saying we need to stand up and say, no, you're not going to take away our rights. So the atheists can take the First Amendment and say,
the atheists make up about 3% of the U.S. population. I doubt
you're using it right now. You're saying those who have religious cannot use the First Amendment to force their religion upon others. So here you are, an atheist, saying that, taking my amendment and saying I'm using it against me. It's ridiculous.
I think we talked about this last time. You know, the absurd notion that me saying no, a government official cannot enforce their religion upon their constituents.
You're saying she should be thrown in jail if she does not sign those licenses. Are you saying that, my friend?
Or resign her position? Yeah, because her position requires this.
She should go to jail because she doesn't celebrate sodomy like you do.
No. Her beliefs have nothing to do with it.
It has everything to do with it.
Her beliefs inform her decision as to why she refuses to do this.
That's exactly
right.
Her
decision is the course of action she takes.
So she can believe all she wants, but she can't live in accordance with that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, sure. Unless, of course, you want to, what is it, Reynolds, that established that polygamy is not allowed. Right? That we don't allow. That's unless you want to go that route again, or allow let's say Satanists to make animal sacrifices in the, or really there's many religions that do animal sacrifices, or Rastafarians to smoke pot. There's lots of different religious behaviors that are not legally allowed.
I don't understand how that has anything to do with it. You're saying that she must celebrate homosexuality.
No, she must file the paperwork associated with it. That's not the same thing as celebrating it.
Her name is on there saying,
I mean, this celebrate is an extreme hyperbolic.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the whole movement is about, if you don't celebrate with me, we will destroy you. She can believe that they're. As a matter of fact, she can even say it. This is the fun part. Can she say it when she does her job? Can she say it? This is sin. Yeah. No, she can't. She has to say this is acceptable. I endorse this. She can't write on the document that this is sin. She has to say. She can say to the people that that she does not agree with what they're doing. She thinks it's wrong. She'll probably get some harassment suits filed in the long run. But as long as she does her job, you can admit that. Even if she says something, she will probably be attacked on that level even as well. She must celebrate it by saying this is a good and viable. Maybe she just needs to keep her mouth shut, right? Do you think that? My wife. That's right. She needs to shut up, right? My wife is Catholic. She's a teacher. Should my wife, who is a Catholic teacher, or she's a Catholic and a teacher in a public school, should she be able to teach transubstantiation to her students? Tell them when she talks about Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, should she be able to give the Catholic story on that, the meta narrative from her perspective as a Catholic? If she wants to give information in a historical sense, that's what the First Amendment is all about. If she wants to proselytize in the classroom, she cannot, because that's what it's all about. That's what the purpose of the First Amendment is. And the purpose of the First Amendment is to ensure that the government does not enforce religion, so that every individual under the government has the right to their own religious beliefs, right? Right. So a government agent refusing to allow people to do something that is legal because it's against her religious beliefs. Right. So let's imagine your wife is not a violation of that in your perspective. It's not a violation of their right to not have her religion enforced on them. I didn't understand that. So if I'm trying to come up with an analogy that's not exact here. How about your wife working in the hospital that requires abortion, and she does not want to participate in abortion, but they say this is the policy, you must do it?
Yeah, I'm not really sure on that. It'd be far more relevant to say, you know, that she works in an abortion, because there are laws that say that you have to accommodate to the best, to a reasonable level, right? If my wife worked in a hospital that does abortions, say she was a nurse, she said, no, I don't want to participate in abortions, and they said, we have the staff and you are trained and everybody's trained well enough that you weren't hired explicitly for this position, that said in the description you will need to do abortions, we can put you elsewhere in the company and somebody else can fill this role, right? That's a reasonable accommodation they can make. As a matter of fact, this happens in grocery stores for Muslims who don't want to handle pork, even if it's wrapped in plastic, right? There's a recent case where somebody was rather upset because this person refused as a cashier to handle pork, refused as a shelf stocker to handle pork. So they ended up becoming assigned to pushing carts for the same pay that they were making, but they didn't feel that job had the proper dignity for them, and they were upset. These were reasonable accommodations, right? They tried different roles for this person and put them into this different role. That is not an option for Kim Davis, because she doesn't even want her deputies to
because her name is on it. Why is she in trouble right now?
Well, right now she's not really in trouble. It's just it's possibly, we don't know.
And why?
Because you're right, her name's not on it. Instead it says pursuant to judicial order upon those.
It's got Brian Mason's name on it, who's the guy that's issuing him, but it's not hers.
I've seen them with a typed in pursuant to judicial order instead, but that you might be right. I guess that's not particularly important at the moment as to what's there, so much as the fact that it's not her name. Sorry, I just realized that my focus is going all over the place here. I apologize for that. I usually fix that before the show starts. For the record, don't get a Microsoft Life Cam.
That's what I have. What do you mean?
Really? Mine, do you have the Life Cam HD?
Yeah.
Mine, it's just this focus thing is there's an autofocus built into it, and it's horrendous. I have to disable it all the time.
You keep going in and out, but I don't think I've had that problem. The lighting gets funny sometimes, but I love mine.
Oh, I can't stand it. Okay, so I think I lost my train of thought when I noticed that I was coming in and out of focus there, so I apologize. I think basically what we were saying though was that her office is in her office, name. Right? There's not an option to accommodate for her in this way. These documents legally need to have the approval or the signature of her office and her as the person in that office.
But Greg,
role job description. So let's ask the example. My wife gets a job in a Planned Parenthood clinic that does not currently do abortions, and they start to do abortions there, and that becomes their primary role. They switch to basically only becoming an abortion clinic, and they really can't support a full-time employee that will not participate in abortions. Does my wife have a legal right to keep her job?
What I'd have to say is that the lion's share always has been with our system of jurisprudence has been to accommodate religious
when possible, right?
As much as the lion's share. Do you agree with that?
Sure, whenever possible.
Okay,
there's laws in place in addition. I believe even Kentucky has one that requires accommodations when possible. Okay. However, the laws also require that this office issues these in this particular fashion, and therefore there's a conflict, right? We cannot accommodate, and that was the original course of action that she tried to take. She offered in front of judges a few times. Can I do this? They said no. Can I do this? They said no. She said, well, then I can't issue these.
Right. So, but this is not the problem. You're talking about the branches of the tree. I'm talking about the trunk. Here we have something that is a brand new sexual liberty that has been brought into.
It's not a brand new sexual liberty.
Indeed,
people have always had the option to have sex with whoever they want.
Not to be reconciled by the state.
Okay, but you talk about it as the sexual. It's a contract. A marriage is a contract.
Okay,
it's a civil union of individuals.
Let's say there's let's say there's no sex involved. Okay, let's just say, what is marriage now, Greg? You have defined it to be absolutely nothing anymore. It used to be the compelling interest of having children, raising children so they can have a mom and a dad. Now we say, forget you kids. I'm going to take away from one of your parents.
Any postmenopausal women should be ineligible for marriage.
No,
any people who have accidentally, or I mean, your argument as it follows.
You know that's not the argument. You know that's easy because you never make common law based on the hard cases, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
You never make common law based on the hard cases, right?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean.
Let's say somebody has to break a speed limit law in order to rush a dying child to the hospital. Do you do away with all speed limit laws because you might have to break it?
No, but I mean, we need to make special exceptions and exemptions for these
There's no
people
exemption. Only a man and a woman can produce child. A man and a man cannot produce a child. A woman and a woman cannot produce a child. You must orphan a child from one of their parents in order to be able to have a child with them. You are taking away one of the child's parents by definition. You're orphaning them so that you can have your own personal pleasure. It's ridiculous. We no longer think about the kids. All we think about is ourselves and say, kids, shut up and deal with it. There's no compelling interest to gay marriage whatsoever. And so now marriage just means nothing.
The compelling interest is, so be that as it may. I'm not even going to argue the meaning of marriage. I'm arguing equal access or equal protection. 14th Amendment here requires equal protection. I mean, there's...
Yeah, but homosexuals are not a race of people.
Are they individuals?
Yes, they're individuals.
So where in the 14th Amendment does it indicate that it only applies to races and classes?
Well, it certainly doesn't apply to somebody who thinks they're something. If somebody thinks they're a gorilla and they need to have special rights to...
not special, just equal, right? I mean, there's nobody asking for anything special. They're asking for people are allowed to get married.
Marriage is for the purpose of procreation. What is the anus for, Greg? Tell me.
Well, it depends on what night of the week it is.
It's not made for that. What's that stuff that comes out of the male organ in the sexual intercourse? What's it for?
Talking golden showers, or is this you're talking about sort of the money shot?
We're talking about procreation, Greg. That's what it's for. That's
not procreation when it goes in her hair.
It's called the procreation. The sex organs are made for the purpose of existence. And the government has a compelling interest.
The government doesn't have any compelling interest at all to legislate what we do in our bedrooms.
Indeed, they do if it causes the unraveling of society. Do you know that the entire industrialized world is going toward extinction as we speak? Every single industrialized nation is at a negative fertility rate right now. Okay. Japan will be gone. 50%, 60% will be gone by the end of this nation.
I sincerely doubt that the people of the nation will simply disappear. The population may
look it up. They sell more adult diapers in Japan than they do baby diapers now. They are going to have one person turning 100 from every person who gives a newborn baby.
But I mean, to think that that's not going to have some sort of rebound or reflexive. So let me go, because the 14th Amendment is rather lengthy. Have you read the 14th Amendment? It's one of the longest amendments there is.
Okay, and?
So I'm just going to run through it here because I think that it deserves being read, considering the context on here.
Greg, but Greg, you cannot interpret it in a way that abrogates the First Amendment. This is the whole point.
So why not? Because, I mean, as far as my memory applies here, there was, in fact, an amendment that changed a previous amendment, wasn't there? It was the 21st, I think. Literally did away with the 18th. You talked last time about the order, the very first amendment. You mentioned that, and we kind of were indecisive as to whether or not the order matters. But in fact, it does. Later amendments take precedent over earlier amendments.
No, none of the Bill of Rights shouldn't. There's a reason why they
shouldn't. That's the Bill of Rights is not like a special class of amendments. They're just amendments to the Constitution.
Yeah, but the
21st Amendment
is the most important amendment, if you ask me.
And frankly, Trey, nobody did.
I'm sorry?
Nobody did ask you which is the most important. I mean, you're Trey Jadlow. You're not.
So you disagree. You disagree that a fundamental right of our
nobody asked me either. This is not our role in this. Like I'm not.
So what are we talking about?
Supreme Court justice. We're talking about the laws as they stand. You're talking about the laws as they should stand. You want to argue that the laws should be different than they are, and you're welcome to make that argument. But if you want that to happen, there's things that you need to do to make it change, right? Nobody's just going to say, "Okay, Trey Jadlow, you're right."
Okay, so you're saying that the laws have changed then?
The laws, sure, laws change all the time.
No, I'm saying with this particular case, we have a new law.
No, there's not a new law that was written in the case of Obergefell. That's not what occurred. What did occur was the practice of marrying people and saying only heterosexual marriages are valid was determined to not be permissible under the 14th Amendment.
Right.
That it was deemed to be an illegal discrimination.
Right.
That is not permissible in that regard. So you're saying that you think that shouldn't be, that the laws should be different than they are. And if you want to make that argument, you're more than welcome to. However, there are routes that you need to go. I mean, violent revolution is one of them, right? Rally the forces. You know, get every preacher and every pulpit out there firing up their flocks, and we'll see a whole bunch of sheep coming out here.
No, you know what I want, Greg, is I want to have rational dialogue, and I want to be able to talk about the foundations that we have, things that you don't want to talk about, but I just want to have the freedom to be able to argue my case. If I'm wrong,
you have every freedom to argue your case. You came on here to discuss Kim Davis and what was happening to her as something that is illegal.
And that's what I asked for. I want to be able to reason my perspective. And if it's unreasonable, then so be it. But I want to be able to have that freedom to
Trey, I have never once seen you make a complete... As a matter of fact, I offered that at the beginning of the last show. Did I not? It was the very first show. I said, please, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to make your case. And what did you do? You started asking questions. So that's not making a case.
No, I've given my case several times, Greg, and you know it.
You've not, well then, but you're just saying you'd like the opportunity to do that. So clearly you don't feel that you have given your case.
So
right?
I have not given a case for Kim Davis to be able to not be thrown in jail. What are we talking about here?
It was you, Trey. It was you that just said, I'd like the opportunity to do this, implying at least that you haven't been given that. And then I said that I gave you the opportunity that you...
No, Greg, I'm doing it right now, but I'm saying this is where enlightenment comes from, when we can debate and dialogue and argue these things. I'm not saying it needs to be so because I say so. I'm saying let's reason together. Let's talk about it.
Sure. And, you know, that's, I mean, you're making a lot of rather authoritative declarations about how it should work, and so am I. But that's the thing in the Democratic Republic in which we live, is that the percentage of the population that sort of is behind you does have an effect on things, right? Now, the whole idea behind the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is to protect the minority perspective. That's to protect against the tyranny of the majority. Because if it was a large majority, wait, that's not a perspective from the...
The purpose is to follow the sanctity of existence. That's what it's all about. And whether you're in a majority or you're in a minority, just because you're the minority doesn't mean
that is the purpose of the Bill of Rights explicitly. Is, I mean, not the Constitution.
It's founded upon the idea of natural law. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator for certain unalienable rights. This is direct Lockean language.
Again, that's not in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So that's the Declaration of Independence.
It is the paradigm. It is the foundation that every one of the founding fathers signed to. And they did not put it in the Constitution because they wanted to have a distinction between church and state, because of the fear
that's actually,
that
I'm
the
pretty
state
sure
would violate the religion.
I'm not sure that it was the same people that signed the Declaration of Independence that signed or ratified the Constitution. When you said
I can guarantee that every single one of the ratifiers of the Constitution would have ratified the Declaration of Independence. It's natural law. That was the paradigm of the day.
Okay.
Rights come from God. Don't give them because they can take them.
I will even, I'm not going to agree that rights do come from God. I might agree that many, if not most or all of them, would agree to that statement.
All of them without exception.
I think Thomas Paine was one of the founding fathers, or the
who was a proponent of natural law theory.
Right.
From God.
No, not from God.
Yes, he was not an atheist.
Thomas Paine was not.
He hated organized religion, but he was a theist.
Okay, I'll let people Google that on their own.
No, you Google it and you come back to me on that.
I'll let people Google that on their own. They can just they'll go ahead, look that one up. Trey, we've been going at this about an hour. I don't know if you have any more time, but there were a couple questions from the viewers from the last show that I wanted to just run by you if you have time to.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So, one of them, it looks like we covered that a bit. That was about the order of the amendments here. Trey, so this is a question from Michael. Said, Trey, how do you characterize the difference between a private citizen and the agent of a state? Specifically, are the rights of an agent of a state different than the rights of a private citizen?
I don't think I can answer that. I think I'm ignorant to answer that.
Okay. Then that was the next one was a follow-up to that. That wouldn't really make sense. Okay, so here's how do you feel about Christian denominations that perform gay marriages?
I would exactly. I'm not sure exactly what the question is.
This is from the user Phony Beetle Maniacs Maniac XS. It looks like, but they said also they said I am a Christian. So what about the churches and denominations who perform gay marriages?
Well, I mean, those. I guess I'm trying to figure out what exactly I want. But those.
Well, you said that homosexuality is inherently at odds with Christianity. So
with biblical Christianity.
Okay, so you're going to qualify that those ones are just not biblical Christian churches. They're a different. So are they non-Christian?
Well, they're not biblical.
Okay, so you'll just,
and they're not historical.
I'll let you hang your hat there. That's okay. That's I mean,
okay.
Let's see. Someone wanted you to expand a bit on the Muslims are our guests argument as to why Christian, why you would be okay with a Christian enforcing her religious perspective in this regard, but say a Muslim clerk refusing to issue a driver's license. Would you like to expound upon that at all?
The thing with I am frightened with what's going on with the movement of Islam moving in. Islam teaches that all men were born Muslims, and I think God rubbed the back of Adam or something, and all men were born out of that, and they all know that they're Muslims, and they have apostatized, and if they will not respond to the Islam message, they are to be destroyed. And Jesus's disciples never gave the power of the sword to his disciples, and I know there were crusades, but it's not biblical. Muhammad did give the power of the sword to his disciples. In fact, that's how most of the Muslim world was won by the sword, and unfortunately, much of Roman Catholicism did as well. But we were not given the power of the sword. Like I said, it's endemic to us is the separation of church and state. Islam does not have that. If you are not following Sharia law, then you, by definition, are not a true Muslim, and you are considered a bad person. People who do violence, depends on which hadiths you follow, but if you do not some are more violent than others, but one thing's for sure, that Islam has no concept of the separation of church and state. You must have a church-state theocracy if you're going to have a true Muslim state. And it frightens me. And as I've told you, Greg, I'm very passionate about the separation of church and state. I feel like it's the great secret, or the thing that people don't realize, the strength of America, why we have flourished so much. And I think much of Europe kind of dwindled partially because of their unwillingness to separate church and state.
Well, I tend to agree, actually, that a separation of church and state is absolutely fundamental to ensuring freedom and a flourishing of the people. I think that your perspective on what the separation of church and state means, that allows agents of the government to act in such a way that it enforces their religion, is inherently self-contradictory, and that it's
but Greg, do you realize that from your perspective, what you're saying is only the atheist can have freedom to do what they want and live it out within their lives? Think about that.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, an atheist cannot, in an official capacity as a government agent, tell you that you cannot enter into a Christian marriage, or even that you cannot refuse to enter into a homosexual marriage. An atheist cannot force a Christian preacher to perform a homosexual marriage. An atheist cannot forbid the practice of worship, cannot refuse to issue a permit for a church to be built.
Yes, but can an atheist pass a law giving approbation to homosexuality and enforce others to follow that law?
I'm not sure I know exactly what the word approbation means.
Approval.
Okay. Well, I don't think that there's anything explicit in marriage that says you have to approve of it, right? I mean, there's plenty.
Well, you're just making it up.
Well, no, I mean, let's
for your perspective either.
No, okay. So my brother is an idiot. He married a girl that he'd been together with for a week. They just started. She wasn't pregnant, for the record. They got that. Now they've been going through an ugly divorce for over a year, and it's a terrible, terrible situation. But they got married, and I'll be damned, I didn't have a say in it, because that was their legal right to do. They make the decision if they're going to get married. Everybody from the outside recognized this as a terrible decision. It was stupid. It was moronic. It was probably one of the worst decisions my brother will ever make in his life. But he did it, and it was legal.
But you don't understand that you're sucking off of my worldview in order to talk about intrinsic right.
I try not to suck off of anything from you, but I think that you'd be against that.
Well, you're doing it, and you've been doing it every time. That's why you can't justify it. See, you base your worldview on blind, irrational faith. You cannot justify human rights. You just say it's that way because I feel that way, and it will lead to disintegration. Any worldview based upon blind, irrational faith cannot stand the test of time. That's why nobody was an atheist before. That's why we're so smart now.
I completely agree that any worldview based on blind, irrational faith cannot stand the test of time.
Then give me your rational justification for the sanctity of human life.
I'm sorry, I'm reading through some of the, just making sure I covered the viewer questions here real quick. So I think we did cover them for the most part.
Well, I'm getting hungry, my friend.
Here's a question I'm trying. This is one I didn't ask yet. It seems relevant. It's the last one here. I'm just trying to interpret exactly what it means. It says, are there any historians that Trey respects that he would back down in his stance if they contradicted his interpretation of the event? So are there, you referred to Locke several times and others. Is there anybody, is there any way that we could find a quote by somebody and present this to you to say, look, you're actually not interpreting this the way that
Absolutely.
That person would have?
Yeah. No, I don't want one quote. I need a
handful of things that demonstrate that they.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And any individual people that you'd be comfortable with? Locke, I know you mentioned quite a bit.
Find somebody from that era that somehow denies natural law and the necessity of meta-narrative that is theistic that is a foundation for rights. You're not going to find it, but go ahead, knock yourself out.
Okay, well, I invite the viewers to do that. Send me any links that you'd like. I'll, say that I'll do some and then probably not get around to it. But other than that, I think that I need to let Trey go now. Trey, I wanted to thank you for joining me for today's show. I don't know if we'll need another one to cover this particular topic. At some point, I think that they will probably meet again. But, if nothing else, I wanted to give you my sincere thanks to you today, because you have afforded me the opportunity to say things like it's not procreation when it gets in her hair. That's I don't think I've ever said that in a hangout before where it was relevant and made sense. So if nothing else, thank you for that. This has been Inspiring Doubt. I hope that it was at least entertaining, if not informative, for all of you. And thank you for joining us. Please, we will follow the comments afterwards. And you can find me on Facebook. My name is Greg Bray, or our page is www.inspiringdoubt.com. Thank you.